shortcuts. Now, if you're used to animating in an application like Adobe Flash, you're probably more comfortable and just more acclimated to that application's set of keyboard shortcuts. What's great about Harmony is we have the option to switch from the default keyboard shortcuts to Adobe Flash keyboard shortcuts. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and come up here to the top of our interface to Edit. So clicking on that, and then we're going to come down to Preferences. This will take us into our Preferences dialog box. And we're going to go ahead and draw our attention now to this first tab right here titled Shortcuts. And you can see by default, our keyboard shortcuts are set to Toon Boom Harmony. So if we come off to the side here and click this downward arrow, we see now that we have the option to switch to Adobe Flash or even Toon Boom Studio if you've been used to using that application's keyboard shortcuts. So for my own personal preference, I'm going to go ahead and switch to Adobe Flash keyboard shortcuts. So once we've done this, we can click OK and commit to that change. Now, if you're using Animate or Animate Pro, you should also have the same ability to switch your keyboard shortcuts to Adobe Flash shortcuts. So this is how we change our keyboard shortcuts here in Toon Boom Harmony. All right, so throughout the duration of this course, we're going to be learning how we can rig a character by just using some of the different tools that are available to us here in Toon Boom Harmony. Now, I do want to mention here at the beginning of the course that if you're using Animate or Animate Pro, you will not be able to open the project files associated with this course because they're exclusive only to Harmony. However, feel free to follow along using your own character because a lot of the things we're going to be talking about will be applicable to all three applications. Now, there will be a few instances where we'll cover some features or tools that are available only to Harmony or only to Animate Pro and Harmony. Okay, so I'll be sure to kind of point those out as we move forward. So in this lesson, we're going to be learning how we can basically start to rig our character together by establishing a hierarchy arrangement over here in the Layers section of our timeline view. So here we have this character that's basically been designed for a cutout style type of animation. And so to just show that, I can uncheck some of these different boxes here for some of these different layers that basically make up the different pieces or parts of the character. And if you want to know more how we created this character, we have an introduction to character design in Toon Boom Harmony on our website. So feel free to check that out if you're kind of curious how we created this cartoon duck. Okay, so you'll notice I was unchecking some of these different parts of the body. And let's have a look at the head here. So we can see we have the head, again, it's broken up into just different pieces. So we have those different facial attributes on their own layer. So ideally, if we were to take the head and rotate it or move it, we would want all of those additional pieces to follow along without having to move them all manually. Okay? And so that's kind of the purpose of the way this character has been designed. It's supposed to kind of give us a lot more control in just how we move different areas around. So what we can do is set up a hierarchy arrangement for the head, basically attaching all these different facial attributes to this main head layer right here. Okay? So let's go ahead and start off with, say, the eyebrows. I'll go ahead and grab eyebrow 2, and I'm going to just drag it here in my layers section of the timeline view right on top of the head layer. And you can see what happens when I do that is that we have this little indentation marker now out to the side of our eyebrow 2 layer. We can kind of see how that layer is offset just a little bit in comparison to the head layer above. And next to the head layer off to the side here, we have an arrow pointing down. If we click on that arrow, we can see how we're able to collapse that head layer, which basically now contains that eyebrow 2 in that layer, within that head layer. So the head is the parent and the eyebrow is a child to the parent head. Let's basically do the same thing with these additional facial attributes. Again, just dragging it on top of the head layer. We'll go ahead now and do the beak, the cheeks, and the eyes. Now, as I've done all this, you'll notice that everything is basically kind of gotten misaligned, misplaced over here in our camera view, okay? And that's because these layers have basically been reordered. The stacking has affected how we're viewing them here in the camera view. Now keep in mind they're all still attached to the head now, and you can see that again by that little indentation marker next to each one of these layers. Again, we drug them all on top of the head and they're attached to the head. But we want to go ahead and adjust the Z position now, okay? So think of the Z position as these different pieces either moving further away or closer to the viewer, okay? So if you click on this button right here, this opens up our data view. And this is going to allow us to basically kind of make some adjustments to position, whether it's position, scale, or rotation. And so if we click on one of the little pluses next to some of these different layers that we have now attached to the head, we can see that we have position, scale, rotation, and skew. And so we want to adjust, as I mentioned just a moment ago, position Z. So we can come over here along the position C row right here, and in our data view, we can see where it's set to 0. Okay. Now what I want to do is make sure I have the animate button turned off, because if I start moving around any of these positions, it'll start setting keyframes. I don't really need to do that. So I'm just going to hover over 0, and we'll just go ahead and come towards the right, kind of pull towards the screen right, and basically bring it +1. And you can see how those eyes now pop forward and are on top of that head piece right there. So this little head piece right here is, again, our head layer, and we're kind of pulling those eyes over the top of that layer. Now we want to go ahead and do the same thing with the other eyebrows. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do both of those eyebrows. So again, with the position Z, we'll go ahead and come forward 1, +1 there. And again, I'm just kind of hovering over and just kind of dragging towards the screen right, just going +0.1 there. And so now we can see those two eyebrows are pulled forward again. All right. Now we can, also play around with the arrangement of the stack of layers within this head group that we've pretty well established here, this little hierarchy arrangement. I could drag the beak above the cheeks, and we can kind of see how that was rectified some. But again, we still need to pull these two layers basically over that main head layer. So just, again, doing the same thing. We got the beak there. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing with the cheeks. And we'll pull that forward as well. And the only thing I really need to do now is kind of adjust the eyes. This eye right here, the left eye is kind of overlapping the cheek. And that's not how we originally had the character designed. So what I can do is let's take that cheek layer and drag it above the eyes. And we can go ahead and kind of see how that affects it. We may not want to do that. We may actually want to take the eyes and drag it below the cheek. And that looks a lot better. So you can kind of play around with those layers there. After you've kind of adjusted some of the Z position stuff in there, and kind of adjust those layers if there's anything that's still looking a little bit off. So now if we collapse the head, we can see now that we have everything kind of repositioned there, and we can grab our transform tool and making sure we're clicking on our head layer, which again contains all those facial attributes. We could move the entire head, or we could rotate it, and all those pieces follow along. Okay, so really handy, cool stuff that you can do just here in your layers section, and basically kind of creating little hierarchy arrangements for some of these different parts of the body. Let's go ahead and demonstrate another way that we can do this, and we'll kind of focus on the upper arm too. And so here we have the upper arm on one layer, the lower arm, and the hand. So ideally, if we want to move the whole arm, we'd like to go ahead and select the upper arm too and have everything follow suit. All right. So what we can do is come over to our network view. So we'll go ahead and kind of expand that out there. Let's go ahead and kind of drag that over just a little bit further. And so we'll go ahead and kind of zoom out here just a little bit so you can kind of see the whole network view. And so basically in your network view, you have all these different modules, and each one of these modules just reflects one of these layers over here. It's just another way of seeing things. Now, if you have animate You probably won't have access to the network view, but you should be able to have access to the network view if you're using Animate Pro. Okay, so let's actually go ahead. I'm just holding down my spacebar and dragging. We'll kind of focus over here to this section of the tree that we have here. And so we have our upper arm 2 module right here. So as we click on each one of these, we can see the different parts of the arm basically being selected over there. And so if we want to attach the lower arm to the upper arm, we can grab this little green point right here and just kind of pull it around. You can see how it kind of snaps around to the upper arm too. And we can see that reflected over here in our layers. Again, we have that same arrow for our upper arm too. So it's the parent for the entire arm. And then we have lower arm 2 right here that's attached to it. We can see that signified by that indentation right there. Now, if we go ahead and just quickly demonstrate with our upper arm 2 layer selected, if we move upper arm 2 in any fashion, lower arm 2 follows along. So let's go ahead and attach the hand as well to the lower arm, just doing the same procedure there, just grabbing that point, pulling that pipe around and attaching it to the lower arm 2 green point. And so we can see now there's indentation for the hand 2 layer, and the lower arm 2 layer now has an arrow pointing downward. So if we kind of collapse that, you can see how it swallows up the hand. And of course, we can swallow up everything by clicking that downward arrow for upper arm 2. So now we're able to move the entire arm together if we're selecting upper arm 2, or we can just move the lower arm and the hand by just checking or selecting the lower arm 2 layer. And of course, you can still move the hand by itself. All right. So using the network view, that's just a different way that you can